What's up guys, Jonny May here and welcome to today's quick tip where I'm going to be talking about the 2-5-1 chord progression. This is the most important chord progression that you should know if you want to play jazz piano. And so in today's lesson, I'm going to show you 5 different levels that you can play the 2-5-1 chord progression. If you're more of a beginner pianist, I'm going to show you my favorite way to play it, and then I'm going to walk you all the way to more advanced levels. I'm going to show you some really great notes that you can add to the chords, and I'm also going to show you kind of a brief little exercise that you can use to practice this in all of your keys. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, we're going to start with a quick little review on the 2-5-1 chord progression, and then I'll teach you these 5 levels. Okay, the 2-5-1 chord progression, it's actually really simple to play. So D minor 7, okay, G dominant 7, and then a C major 7. Okay, these are basically chords just stacked in thirds, right? So we just start on the D, up a third, up a third, up a third, D minor 7, G, all thirds, C major 7, all thirds. It's a super simple chord progression, but it's used in tons and tons of tunes. You know, the autumn leaves drift by my window, right? Someday when I'm awfully low, there's your 2-5-1, right? Fly me to the moon, fly me to the moon, there's the 2. Let me play, there's the 5. And there's the 1, okay? So it's a super important chord progression to know. All right, so if you're more on the beginner side, how can you play this chord progression in a more interesting way? Because, you know, just jumping to the chords does not sound the most interesting. And a lot of beginner pianists, they'll just use inversions. They might play like this, and it just doesn't sound the most interesting either. So if you're a little more on the beginner side, I recommend that you use simple chord shells, which sound like this. It sounds really simple, but it's very beautiful. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm taking my chords, like my D minor 7, and I'm playing a shell, which is like a partial chord. And the way it works is when you're playing a chord shell, you usually remove the 5th from the chord, the A, and then you end up with the root, the 3rd, and the 7th. Okay? So you got to understand this. Take the 5th out, and then what's really cool is you take that 3rd and you put it on the top. You get a really beautiful D minor 7 chord. Okay, it's a chord shell. Now on the G7 chord, check out how close it is. It's right there. All I have to do is move one note in the right hand, the C, down to the B. Okay, so this is a G7 chord, and I'm just taking the D out, the 5th, and then I've got the root on the bottom. There it is. And then my C major chord, it's right there. Isn't that gorgeous? Again, it's a C major 7. I'm taking the 5th out of the chord. There's the full chord, and I put the E on the top, okay? And then if you want to go to a little C6 chord, kind of as a substitute chord, that sounds really nice, okay? So if you're more on the beginner side, play your chord shells like this. 2, 5, 1, 1. It's way more beautiful than going 2, 5, 1, using kind of these kind of chunky chords. Now you can also play a different inversion of this. You could put your D minor 7 chord like this, and then you could play your G7 chord like this. And that's also really beautiful as well to play, okay? Now before I teach you the next level, level 2, you can actually practice this in all of your keys if you want to master your 2-5-1. And so something that I encourage you to do is to shift around to some different keys. You know, try this in the key of F major, okay? What's the 2 chord in the key of F major? It's a G minor 7, right? 5 chord is a C dominant 7, right? The 1 chord is a F major 7. And then play your chord shells. 2, you see it? 5, and then 1, okay? All right, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. Are you ready for level 2? I'm really excited to teach you level 2 because level 2 is really nice. We're going to take the harmony up just a level, and I call this late beginner. Here's how this one sounds. It's a little more interesting. So for this level, I'm basically adding one note to my chord, but I'm using one specific technique that really adds some color to your chords. These are called chord extensions, okay? And it's actually a really simple idea. Basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that first chord, D minor 7, and I'm adding one note to the chord, and in this case, I'm just going to add my 5th back into the chord, okay? So you get a little more full sounding D minor 7 chord, but here's the magic. Check out the G7 chord. Right? A little more interesting than that. I'm adding the A to this. This is called a chord extension, and it's basically when you take a chord like a G7 chord, and if you stack one more third on the top note, the F, you go to the A, this is called the 9. And this is a really cool note that you can add to your chords, like a G7, right? Just makes it sound a little jazzier, a little more colorful. And then on the C major 7 chord, again, I'm keeping the chords really simple, but I'm just adding one note in. In this case, it's the 5th of the chord. Again, this just comes from the C major 7 chord. And then I like to go to the 6 here like that, okay? So once again, 2, 5, 1, okay? Now, there's another really cool way that you can play this style or this type of chord progression, and that is to start on a D minor 9 chord. So one thing you can do is on your D chord, play your shell down here and put your 9 in on your D chord, okay? That's cool. And then on your G chord, you can go to your ordinary G7 chord, which looks like this. Again, I'm just sort of spreading the notes out. I've got the 5th here. And then on the C major 7 chord, put the 9 on top. Isn't that pretty? Okay, and then I can bring this 7 down to a 6. Okay, so this is an alternate way that you can play it. 2, really beautiful. 5, okay, 1, there it is, and now bring it down to the 6. Now, I do encourage you to practice this in some other keys if you really want to master this technique. So, for example, if you wanted to play this in the key of F major, well, we know the 2 chord is a G minor 7, okay, 5 chord is C7, and the 1 chord is F major 7, okay? Well, how would you play this? Well, 2 chord, there's my G, there's my shell, there's the 5th on the top, the 5 chord, oh, gorgeous. This is a C9 chord, there's the shell, there's the 9, and then the 1, there it is, simple F major 7 chord, and I bring this down to the 6, like that. Now, I wanted to mention, if you want to learn more about chord shells and chord extensions, these are the notes that I'm adding to these chords. We have some really great courses on these topics. We have our chord shells and guide tones course, and we also have our chord extensions course. So I'll put a link to those if you're interested in learning about those topics. All right, are you ready for level 3? This is the early intermediate level, and this starts to get to more of a level where you want to add even more notes to your chords and make them sound even more interesting. So check out what our 2-5-1 is going to sound like now. Isn't that gorgeous? And believe it or not, I'm only adding kind of one more note to each of these chords. So these are called rootless voicing chords. It's a really important technique that you should know if you want to play jazz piano. And so what I'm doing is on my first chord, D minor 7, I'm playing it like this. Okay, so it's like a D minor 7, but what I'm doing is I'm putting all my notes on the top like this, and then I'm adding a 9 to it like this. Now, the reason we call this a rootless voicing chord is because look at my right hand, there's no D in it, there's no root. And so these are rootless chords. They're really important chords if you want to play jazz. Right? That's the 2-5-1 in my left hand, but no roots, okay? So we're just putting the rootless voicing chords in our right hand here, kind of as an accompaniment device, okay? So 2, here's our 5 chord. Ah, gorgeous. This is our G7, and this is a kind of a magical chord. I'm, putting my B in and my F, but then I'm adding a couple really cool chord extensions, the E and the A. Okay, this is called the 9, and this is called the 13 of the chord. These are very common notes that you add to a dominant 7 chord. Okay, 2, 5. Notice also that bottom note C moves down a step to the next chord. And then our final chord, C major 9. Okay, again, this is a chord that I taught you earlier. We just have more notes in the right hand. And then I bring this down to a C 6-9 like this. And again, if you're not really familiar with these chords, C major 7, C major 9, there's the notes, and I'm just sort of clustering them together in the right hand. Okay, so once more, 2, 5, 1, 1. Okay, now you can practice basically a different version of this. If I brought my chords down, I can play my 2 chord here, my D minor 7. Gorgeous 5 chord, here's my G7. See that? And then the 1 chord, you can play it down here like this, C major 9, and then down to the 6-9. Okay, it's the same notes that I taught you earlier, 2, 5, 1, but I'm just bringing everything down to where I have the third on the bottom. There are actually names for these voicings, like on the D minor 7 chord, where the 7's on the bottom. We call this a B voicing, and when you put the third on the bottom, this is called an A voicing, okay? By the way, if you want to learn more about rootless voicing chords and all the different voicings and how you kind of use them in tunes, we have a great course on rootless voicings. Pretty much everything you need to know. I'll put a link to that below as well. So before we move on to the next level, I really encourage you to practice this. You might try this in a different key. Again, we might use the key of F major. And so rootless voicings, starting on my 2 chord, my G, 7, 9, 3, 5. My 5 chord, C, 3, 13, 7, 9. Really nice. And then the F, beautiful, F major 9, 7, 9, 3, 5. And then I bring the 7 down to a 6. Okay, really important to try to play these in some other keys. All right, are you ready for level 4? This is for all of you kind of late intermediate pianists. And you might be thinking, Johnny, this sounds really cool, but I want to play it in an even more interesting way. I want to add some color, and maybe I want to spread the chord out a little bit more and get kind of a rich, beautiful sound. This is for all of you pianists. This is called the Quartal voicing technique, and it sounds like this. Ah, doesn't that sound gorgeous? These are chords that are primarily built in 4th intervals, or we call these quarters, right? A quarter is a 4th, so these are chords built in 4ths. And so the way this works is on our first chord, D minor 7, we're going to play it like this. Ooh, check that out, okay? Now in the sheet music there's no D, I'm just kind of using the top of the chord, but look at these notes, G, C, F, A, and D, okay? This is indeed a D minor 7, but I'm adding a G to this, which we call the 11, okay? This is a very common chord extension that we add on minor chords. So if you play your D minor 7, add a 3rd, that's a 9, add a 3rd, that's the 11. And believe it or not, that is an 11th interval. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, okay? You can think of it as a 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, if that makes that easier for you, okay? So D minor 11, gorgeous. You can add the root on the bottom, and then the second chord, G7, grab that G on the bottom. Beautiful chord, built actually in all 4ths, F, B, E, A, and D, okay? This is a G7 chord, right? These are the notes of the G7, but I've got an A and an E in here. Remember, these are the chord extensions. Remember, G7 looks like this. Here's the 9, and the E we call the 13, or you can simply think of it as the 6, okay? And so we're just adding these into the G7 chord to get a really beautiful sound. And then finally our last chord, our C6, 9. Again, we're just trying to get as many 4th intervals as we can. So E to A to D, D to G, G to C. And it's a simple C6, 9. We're just spreading it out in 4ths. So this is a beautiful way of playing a 2-5-1. 2, 5, 1. And I like to jump it up here on the C chord. Okay, and you can jump from the root as well. 2, 5, 1. 1, 2, 5, Now, there are other ways you can play quartal voicings. For example, you could start with the A on the top and play your D chord like this, and then on your G chord, you can play it like that, okay? So again, I'm trying to get all the notes in here, but you can play them lower or higher on the piano, and then on your C6, 9, it looks like this. Now, a quick little note on your quartal chords, sometimes you will not be able to play a 4th interval. Sometimes you'll need to put like a 3rd interval in the chord, as you might notice down here. Or up here on the C6, 9, you may have noticed a little 3rd interval. That's okay. The thing with quartal voicings is you want to have as many 4th intervals as possible, but you definitely can have, a 3rd interval, a 2nd interval if you want. And once again, if you want to do a deep dive on quartal voicings, you want to know how to use them in chord progressions, how to accompany using this technique on tunes, we have a really great course on quartal voicings. I'll put a link to that below. All right, all of you level 5 pianists, you advanced pianists, you want to play all the super cool notes, the crunchy notes, the really jazzy chords. Stuff like that. This is definitely an advanced sound. This technique is called the upper structure technique, and it is a very cool concept. And here's how it works. Basically, you're going to start on your 2-5-1 chord progression, like our D minor, 11 chord here, but check out the next chord. Oh, doesn't that sound absolutely gorgeous? I remember the first time hearing my jazz teacher play this type of chord, and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm like melting inside. I have to know what you're playing. And he said, well, it's just an upper structure. And the way it works is you're on a G7 chord, and all I'm doing in the right hand, I'm playing an E major triad, right? This is just an ordinary E major, but I'm placing it on top of a root 7 chord shell on the G7, and combined, you get a gorgeous sound. And then you can resolve this to your C6-9 like this, and then you can even hop it up like this, okay? So this is the upper structure concept. And upper structure is a major triad or a minor triad that you play in your right hand, and you usually play a chord shell in your left hand. And there are a bunch of different upper structures that you can use on your chord progressions, but this is one of my favorite ones, 2, 5, 1, 1. And this particular upper structure is built on the 6th of G. It's the 6th of the 5 chord. So when we're on a G7 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you just play a major chord built on this note, G7 in the left hand, and you get a really beautiful sound, okay? So definitely a cool technique, and this is something that you can also practice in some other keys, like let's say you want to play this in the key of F major, then you would go to your G minor 11 chord, you play it like this, and then on the 5 chord, beautiful, and then on the 1 chord, you can play it like this, and then hop it up, okay? Now before we go, I want to teach you just a couple other beautiful upper structures that I really encourage you to practice. These are just some little bonus options if you're a little more on the advanced side. The first one goes like this. That sounds beautiful. So on the 5 chord, right, we're starting on the D minor 11, really beautiful. This is an E flat major upper structure on a G7 chord shell, okay? And it has kind of a crunchy, kind of a darker sound, right? Get the E flat and the B flat in there, and then you can resolve it to the C6-9. Again, if you wanted to practice this in some other keys like F, 2, 5, A flat upper structure to the F chord, quite beautiful. And then another one that I love to use is this upper structure on a D flat. Check it out. That sound beautiful? There's my 2 chord, my 5 chord, D flat major triad, upper structure with the chord shell on the bottom, and then I resolve this to a C6-9, okay? And I do want to mention once again, if you want to learn all of your upper structures, how to use them in tunes, we have a great course on this. I'll put a link to that below. Thanks for watching this week's quick tip. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please let me know in the comments, and be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 1,000 step-by-step lessons for all playing levels, where you'll learn your favorite songs, styles, and how to improvise at the piano. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.